Hello. I'm happy to welcome you to the first of our sponsor series of 2025. This series today, this webinar is offered by one of our sponsors, BMedic. And before I introduce our presenter, I would like to just make a few announcements. I want to inform you about another sponsor, Sadar Psychological, is paired with AppEd, and they are offering a speaker series that begins actually tomorrow. And for more information about that, you can go to apped.org or the link that you see here. Another announcement would be about our podcast, Healthy Brain, Happy Body. That is run by Dr. Saul Rosenthal. And after you hear today's presentation, I'm sure you're going to want to hear that podcast because Dr. Saul meets with Dr. Taylor and goes even more in depth about today's presentation. Planning ahead, think about what you're doing on Tuesdays at noon Eastern time. That's when NRBS Connect Tuesday meetings are with Christine Tyrell Baker and Jessica Ewer as your hosts. There's a variety of topics. Again, if you go to the nrbs.org website, you can look at the list of topics that are scheduled for this year. Thinking further ahead, the NRBS conference is going to be in the fall this year again, and we're going to be hosting it in New York City. We have an awesome site for the conference. We're pairing with the New York City School District, and we're going to have some pretty cool speakers. We're still putting it together, so keep your eye out for that information. And I want to thank BMedic for today's presentation. Their executive director, Bernard Wandernoth, is joining us, and our presenter will be Taylor Capoziello. I never say it right, so sorry about that. She'll be talking about data-driven treatment planning. Dr. Taylor brings a distinctive blend of academic expertise and hands-on experience to her work, integrating psychophysiology with somatic approaches to healing. Her journey in the healing arts began in 2002 as a body worker, where she developed proficiency in multiple modalities, including craniosacral and trigger point therapies. Her deep understanding of the mind-body connection is informed by professional and personal experiences. Having studied kinesiology and holistic health, she is specialized in psychophysiology and then later discovered neurofeedback as a powerful tool for transformation when integrated with all the modalities she knows. Her extensive experience in both bodywork and neurofeedback provides unique insights into trauma stored in the body and the brain, informing her integrative approach to assessment and training. Additionally, she is an extensive traveler. Actually, my go-to resource if I'm going somewhere unknown to me. She already knows about it. If you don't already know her, you have the opportunity to meet her today, and please enjoy the presentation. I know you will be. So let's get started, Taylor. Please take it away. Thank you.
Hi, thank you so much, you guys. So, and we also have Bernard with us today, who is going to be able to answer all the questions that become technical. So, do we want to start with having Bernard talk a little bit about how this started, why we're doing this, and then jump into the talk? Okay. So I'll get started in a second, but I want to have Bernard give a little bit of a background on why we're here. So.
Oh, okay. Hello everybody. It's such an honor to be here and to speak about this. So, I got started 20 years ago in neurofeedback. My background is I'm satellite engineer, right? So I built in my previous life, I built satellite technologies, and my background is I'm engineer with special focus on signal processing and information theory. So when I got started in neurofeedback, I was super, super enthusiastic about it to see that we can use technologies to make a difference in mental health. The question, of course, was there, how can we improve? How can we make it more effective? How can we support research processes? What works and what doesn't? And so I was simply curious about this. And like over and over again, people said to me, "Oh, Bernard, you really must do a QEEG because otherwise doing neurofeedback is not ethical." But I was wondering how a signal at the scalp, which the signal, signal to noise ratio of the EEG is lower than the so-called Shannon limit. In other words, there is no information there. And you need to do a lot of tricks to get a high enough signal to noise ratio to make sense out of the EEG. So it didn't really make a lot of sense to me to do simple brain maps. And so I started research, who is doing what, who are the opinion leaders here. And again, I came across Yuri Kopatov, who obviously not only developed proper signal processing methodologies as a theoretical physicist, but also who emphasized the value of event-related potentials. So long story short, in 2009, so 16 years ago, we founded the company HBImed in Switzerland. HBI stands for Human Brain Index. So co-founders were Yuri Kopatov, myself, and Andreas Müller. You probably know Andreas. He is probably one of the really leading geniuses in this regard because he is clinician. He saw EEGs from thousands of people and their clinical journey. So the next piece of long story short is that we have by now the largest database of its kind, and which is a foundation for biomarkers, right? Because I realized early on, this stuff is way too complex for most people to understand. Okay, what does it mean if I have an elevated theta-beta ratio and a larger latency on this component and that and blah, blah, blah. So the solution for that is to apply the latest AI tools. And by the way, HBImed started with applying AI tools long before it was a hype, right? So the idea is to create reliable markers and biomarkers for particular questions so that people do not have to know all the details about signal processing of the brain. Anyway, so at the end of this whole process, we started to build the so-called Brain Function Analyzer. And by the way, I give credit to Angelica for this word. We used to call it report generator, which doesn't sound so great, which is a whole tool set that allows us to comfortably analyze EEG, ERP data and come up with quite good data. Today's presentation is how to learn this, how to use it, and what's the value of clinical practice. So instead of myself giving a presentation, which would be a presentation by an engineer, we asked Taylor if she could make that presentation so that she can emphasize the clinical value. So what's the value to your clinical practice when applying these technologies, right? And I'm super delighted. I saw that Elia is on the call, who is one of the major developers in this process. So, okay, please take it from here. Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, Taylor, please go ahead.
And Bernard's going to be able to help answer any questions that I can at the end, especially as it gets a little more technical. So thank you guys for being here. Really excited to be talking about this. Talking about data-driven treatment planning, maximizing clinical insights through advanced report generation. So why do we want to use a brain analyzer? Why would we want to use the brain function analyzer for your report instead of what you've just been doing? So for myself, I got into this because I was basically reinventing the wheel. I talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I had created my own template and was copying and pasting and writing everything over and over again. But that doesn't really allow me to time, and it makes me wasting a lot of time doing everything over and over. So as I got into this allowed me to see a lot more data, to have it streamlined, and to make it that I can create it very personalized for my clients, for what matters for me in my clinic, not for other people's clinics. Also allows me to use AI tools, streamlining the data, able to compare everything. So I'm no longer copying and pasting, and to be putting people into different subtypes that is seen from the AI generation of compartmentalizing in like ADHD subtypes or depression or other things like that. And this, the HBImed is constantly coming up with new ways to sort data and enhance report. One of the things that eventually will be happening is even some more AI in the actual report writing that is being worked on and we're all playing around with now. So, it's just continuing to improve and really exciting there. So the key features of the Brain Function Analyzer are the customizable reports and the questionnaires. They're the main questionnaires that I like using, but I'm also going to show you guys all the questionnaires that they have available using the raw data that you can either manually artifact, as I do. I have a really hard time letting that go, or doing the automatic artifacting, of which I have tested over and over again, and it shows that it works every single time. I'm just so funny. I do really like manually going through it. It's also done in a very easy way. And highlighting the key areas of interest, which is seen through when you're looking at the spectral graph originally, and then you get to click on the areas that you want to look at, pick the components out, and I'll be showing you all those things. Loretta integration, pinpointing the exact location, the Brodmann areas, and automatically spitting out what Brodmann area that is, what it means, and how it would affect for that person. The ERP components analyzed with descriptions on how to present or how they would present for them, and using AI to examine the vigilance, ADHD subtypes, mood regulation, and more. So from this, we're going to use a remote desktop. And then going a little bit more into the AI function, because I think a lot of people got excited about hearing about AI. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it, and then we're going to move on from that. So in addition to the diagnostic algorithms, such as ADHD index or the emotional regulation index, using AI is a multi-dimensional regression analysis, and it's used in capturing the different states of vigilance during that VCPT task, the ERPs. And this makes it possible to develop the feeling for the client's actual experience, what's going on. And when most people think of AI, we know that it's not there yet, right? So we're like, okay, that's not really going to work in our practice. But the Brain Function Analyzer uses layers of integration that creates stable and desirable results. And the building block starts out with a classification index. So in the example of ADHD, what group of ADHD a person belongs to. So the AI uses 170 different classification methods, and then it looks at the relationship curve vector, and it uses deep learning or machine learning systems that were created to control the output for the database to place a person in a group or category. And that sounds like a lot, but it's still not enough, because if we have a small sample and we stop there, it's not going to be stable or accurate. So from here, then it's going to go into something that is much more stable. We're going to use it's going to be applied into a linear lines throughout the sample. And that slope of the linear lines shows a clear chart and reading that we as a clinician can then interpret for the client. And that stable classification index looks at each variable for which feature is the most important to the individual. And this part I talked a little bit about in Saul's podcast as well. So that index was created using AI to originally examine 900 ADHD traits, which found that there was no difference between those in the healthy control and people with ADHD in 850 of those. So because of that, it's only the remaining 50 variables. So that is all what's going in when we talk about AI. It's not just putting it in and having Claude answer questions for us. There's a lot of layers that go into it. So I think that's pretty fascinating. So now I'm going to kind of just guide you through some of the basic things. We're not going into, this is not a class on how to use it. It's just familiarizing yourself, seeing, is this something that could work in your practice? So we first start by analyzing the data. This is something that I'd imagine everybody on this call is doing, or if not, getting ready to do. So we're recording the data both in the EEG and the ERPs. And just like Angelica was saying, tomorrow, John LeMay is going to be talking on ERP. And if you haven't got into ERPs yet, it's a really great area for us to know more about our client for a variety of reasons. So we want to start gathering that data in addition to the EEG. And just to really oversimplify everything on here, main thing is you're going to pick out the questionnaires that work for you and your clients. You're going to have them fill it out. I have mine fill them out at home before. Then you're going to upload the EEG and ERP data that you already recorded. And you're going to also, then you're going to decide if you're going to manually clean or automatically clean. You're going to select the sections of EEG for the clients that you want them to see. That's all going to get uploaded. It's going to guide you through picking EEG and ERP components. And then you're going to use your custom template for your practice, and it's going to create a report. So it is pretty simple in that sense for that part. The advantages of using AI in EEG and ERP analysis is efficiency. So like I was saying, there's a lot of information that we're gathering. It's allowing us to look at all that information right away. We can tailor the templates, reducing the need for re-explaining technical details. So for myself, I found that I liked adding a section that really talked about what I'm looking at in the EEG. What's that mean? What's peak alpha frequency? I didn't really want to say that every time again. So I created a whole template that included that. I put it in the front. So clients that want to know more, there it is. I don't have to go over it. So that's really nice for that. We have enhanced accuracy. It reduces the errors in artifacting and pattern recognition. And it guides clinicians to the most critical components, especially because when we use all this information and we're looking at questionnaires, we're looking at the EEG, ERPs, what AI is showing us, we're looking for seeing the same thing over and over again. And that's where we're going to target our training. And it also does the comprehensive visuals, the spectral graph for EEG, and ready to read ERPs and summaries. And I'll show you examples of all these things. So we start by first combining your data. You're going to be using their server, and so you'll open it up. You'll have all your information in there, and we're going to start dumping everything in essentially. So at this point, we will have already put our questionnaires in that you can see listed. We've put our EEG and we've put our ERPs in there. And from there, it's going to guide us through the ICA, frequency component, and Loretta, and all the ERP parts. So I'm not going to go too much more into detail on that, but just start familiarizing your guys self on this. I put in a couple of my favorite questionnaires, although there are more, and on the next slide, I'll show you more. But what's really nice about them is that they also put out these really clear graphs as well. So for our clients to read, and then under the graphs, it talks about what brain regions they are, how that could present for the client. So we can see in the Van Dusen, this is not based off the EEG. This is based off of a questionnaire. And then we can see certain areas that this person in red is struggling based off of that questionnaire, or orange. And we're going to tie that in later if we're seeing those same patterns in the EEG. But there are a lot of other questionnaires. So maybe for you guys, there's something else that is better. So here's a list of some of them. We have them based off of both for children and adults. And there is a long list of different types. The personal clinical data is the most helpful. This is one where your client's going to pre-put all their information in. And if you want to have something added or removed, it is customizable from here. So if there's questions that you're always asking that with your clients, it's all going to be written out, and they can come to you even before you start recording your data, and you can take that into consideration as well, putting medication, all those things here. When we were doing the cleaning of the data or just looking through it, we can also click and pick what areas that we want to auto-generate in our report. So here we can see obviously why I picked this one as an example. We're seeing a sharp and slow transient occurring. And so I click that to highlight it. For whatever reason, however you want to put in there, you can have the eyes open, eyes closed, and it just automatically generates it. And if you want to have something standard written under it all the time, that's also something you can do. This is using the HBI database, which is over 1,000 healthy subjects that are used. It's age and sex matched, ages 7 to 80 years old, and it's continuous updates. So we're able to compare using that database as well. from here, we're seeing a lot of different ways of looking at the data. So from that database, we're going to look at the spectral data, which if you're familiar with WinEEG or a lot of other things, just the colors, it pops out that way. We're also going to be able to look at it in either absolute or relative, seeing how a client differs from the normative population, and also the head maps that a lot of people are familiar with using. So we have all of that auto-generated. So under spectral, I have it automatically written now what we're looking at. So the person knows what colors are, what we want it to look like. So I don't have to go into detail explaining that for clients if they're wanting to do a deep dive. All that explanation is there. So that is some of my favorite things. And then we can also spot areas of concern easier in red. So as we look at the theta to beta ratio, we can see automatically on the right where is in red. So we can not have to look at that red dot, look at this scale, see is that something. We know automatically this person has a high theta to beta ratio because it's already been highlighted for us in red, making it easier for us and our clients also. It's pretty self-explanatory on that. So not only do we have the visual pictures, the numbers, but we also have the highlighted in red. And then when we look at the arousal index, we can see this nice level where this particular client is within the normative. We see nothing highlighted in red. And then that also auto-generates saying what that would mean for that client. Compared with peers, an example shows a balanced values and conditions and what it implies. That is all auto-generated. We also have the streamlining in Loretta analysis. So from what we picked out in the spectral, we picked out the components, we picked out where the components were in the brain, and then it comes up with where it is in Loretta. So it is going to guide you through picking exactly how you want the images to look for the brain. But now we have it with what frequency we're looking at, what it looks like in the head map, what it looks like in spectral, and then also what it is in Loretta in addition to the Brodmann areas, and saying what that area is responsible for and how it could present for a client, making this a lot easier for us as clinicians. The simple ERPs are going to show here. It's printed very clearly. We can see the blue is the subject, red is the database, and black is the difference between. We also see at the very bottom, if it's above in the blue, that we're having a statistical significance above or below. So once again, we can draw our eyes to it and we can see instantly what's going on here. We're going to look at this in the go and no-go task and an auditory as well. From that information, remember how I talked a while ago that all of the AI information is coming from the VCPT task, which is what was just shown where we got those simple ERPs from. Now it's going to start compartmentalizing everybody into groups. And that's what I talked about at the very beginning of this talk. So we had the ERP marker analysis, and it identifies the clients in alignment with specific groups for ADHD and mood regulation. And there are some other ones that should be coming out soon as well. Like I said, they're always coming out with more information on this. So this provides targeted information based on data similarities. So if we see in here that they are having, that they are related to subtype 1, that's the highest percentage they have. We have a whole bunch of information on it. So subtype 1 is involving the prefrontal cortex, symptoms like manifesting poor executive functioning. Subtype 2 is more cingulate, and that's more about dysregulation of the cingulate. So problems with arousal and monitoring, poor adaptation, recklessness, lack of flexibility. Subtype 3 is limbic, poor emotional regulation. And then we have subtype 4, a developmental lag. So with this information from what we just saw here, we're able to start putting people in percentages of groups and seeing, and then tying that in with what we see in the EEG and the ERPs and our questionnaires. So if over and over again we saw the cingulate involvement, we saw that there was a high theta to beta ratio, we saw the Brodmann areas under the cingulate, we saw that they rate it high here. We saw it also in the Van Dusen. We know that we really want to target the cingulate. What I really like about this is, especially if we see consistency over and over again, we're not always able to do QEGs over and over again as much as we might like to. We might not be able to. So if something like the Van Dusen questionnaire was lining up really great with it, well, then we can actually start using something like that to track our client's progress as well. So it creates a little bit more flexibility with feeling really solid on those things. The ERP components zooms in even more than the simple ERPs. And the HBImed database comprises of, uses 11 of these components. And when we're going through and clicking it, we're going to have these ERP components pop up. We see it really nice and clearly. The blue is going to be the subject. Red is the database and black is the difference. And once again, we can also see the statistical difference at the bottom if there's any changes. And we just simply click the button. So if we're seeing that's exceptionally high, we click the button for it being high. Then we go on to the next one, any of the 11 components that we have. And then we accept it. And once it's accepted, we get to see it this way. So from here, we see all the different components. It's in the report. We get to see where there are changes from it. And the areas that you clicked automatically say that was the P1, N1. It's the visual input. Let's talk a little bit about it. And how would that, for if it was too high or too low or too fast or too slow, whatever, it's going to say how that would affect that client, how that's going to present in it. So that's you not having to just automatically know that information, but from you just visually looking at it, picking out the areas that you see, automatically it generates in there. And also if you're like, so when I was new on this, I over-clicked a lot of them. But what's great is that if you over-click some of them, you just erase it before your client gets it, especially if you're just curious as you're learning. So it's not, even once your report's done, you're going to be able to do a lot of editing in there. So to kind of wrap up about this is really about efficiency that lets you focus on care. This is about guiding you through, making it a lot easier for you, using AI to do that, to make it so AI is able to see a lot more than the human eye could, and making it that it supports the planning with the group-based ERP analysis and empowers evidence-based decision with clear, detailed reports. So this does the customizable templates, enhances Loretta analysis, efficient workflows, empowers your practice with the cutting AI technology. And the next step is learning how to actually use this. So today was just showing you a little bit about what it can do, seeing how that works for your practice, and all these things go into the report. And just putting a little plug in, like I said, they're continually updating it. They're always having things. You might decide to change your template as your practice is building for other things that you're wanting. They're really responsive on helping you do that. So they'll help you build that template as well. And there is more things coming out. So Andy has been working on creating AI for the actual writing of it and working. So he's trained it in over 5,000 of his reports and starting to create it. And that's going to be a different AI template. So it's trained in there, figuring out how to work with the prompts, but essentially, hopefully making that part a lot easier. So as we gather all this information, using correct prompts to have it also pull up all this information and help us with our report writing as well. So that part, is not available quite yet, but is in the works and starting. So that's pretty exciting that we are heading that way. And it is going to get hopefully easier and easier for clinicians and getting the correct information out to their clients faster. So the last slide that I have on learning how to use the generator, and they are going to be having a class on it starting April 21st to July 21st. And it's going to, there's the time. They'll be sending out emails for it. So any information that you're curious on it, you'll be getting access to that in your emails as soon as that's all ready. So at this point, I wanted to leave a lot of extra time because I feel like this is a really big topic. And between Bernard and I, seeing what we can do to help answer questions for you guys. So thanks so much for showing up.
Wow. Thanks, Taylor. That was quite the ride. A lot contained in there. There are not any questions in the chat, so I'm going to take a minute while people post their questions. I think I understand why there aren't any questions. The first time I went to one of these classes, I was like, I say. So it needs to digest a little bit.
Yeah, and it's a lot of information for sure. And it's a really nice way of, like I said, the report generator, I just love it because it made my time efficiency so much better. And I've come up with like my little tricks and stuff that I do. So after, when I'm recording the eyes open, eyes closed, I'm taking notes, I'm looking at everything. And then when I get to the doing the VCPT task at that point, which is 20 minutes long, and the client's doing it, I'll keep an eye on it, but I'm not taking as detailed notes because we usually get a little bit more muscle tension, more movement, things like that. And I'll start actually uploading the eyes open, eyes closed data to the server and start going through, looking at it. I've already in my notes written the areas that I want it to go back and look at. And so by the time the ERP task is done, I'm ready to put that. I've already put the questionnaires in. Now the eyes open, eyes closed is all done. The ERP task is done, and then I can upload that. And like I said, that one I just let it automatically artifact. So I'm ready to kind of just go and move through pretty fast. So it works out really well for me on my timing and everything.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you certainly need to develop patterns. I do want to apologize that I didn't introduce Bernard, who is like the brains and the energy and the force behind all of this. I did put links to BMedic in the chat. So depending on where you are, that can give you some more information. But what I want to tell you is both of those, if you reach them by email or phone, they're very, very happy to talk with you and give you lots of information. So there are some questions in the chat about equipment and just the amplifiers and so forth. So I wonder, Bernard, would it make sense for you to give a quick overview on that?
I didn't have a chance to read through all the questions yet. I will. So, first and foremost, I said it earlier, I was curious. I was just curious. I wanted to know, okay, can this help to make better clinical decisions? And here, Andreas Müller came in, who said, who saw 10,000s of clients and patients and with all their stories and all of this. And he was always saying, oh, I wish I could have more insight what's going on in this brain so that I could have help to make better clinical decisions, to design the therapeutic intervention in an optimum way. So, and then he met Yuri Kropotov, and the two of them realized, oh my God, we have huge potential. Let's build a database. Because the idea was, we measure a patient, compare that patient to a healthy subject of the same age group, and then figure out or get more insight into that brain. As Yuri usually says, it's another window to the brain, right? So they built the first database and figured, oh, this can be really helpful. And Andreas's vision was all along that we get more insight in the function of the brain so that we can make more informed decisions how to design an optimum therapeutic intervention. That goes way beyond neurofeedback, by the way, right? It also has impact on medication and other forms of intervention. So my role here was basically the engineer's role, right? After I was involved in development of cutting-edge neurofeedback equipment that was also able to work with slow cortical potentials and the full range of EEG, we figured that we need to develop high-precision ERP equipment. At that point out there was no equipment that had approvals. Also, the task presentation software had high jitter. None of the task presentation software was approved. And for clinical use, that needs to be, right? So we took the effort to create equipment which is super precise, in timing and amplitude and all of this, so that we have reference quality for this. I think most of the attendees are from the US, so we have full FDA for our equipment, including the task, so the Teradyne that we use for event-related potentials. There were questions about other equipment, and I'm afraid I can probably not say much about it. So for what I can say is, if you are just interested in the resting state EEG, most equipment will do, right? You will simply export the data in EDF format, and that will allow to import into the brain function analyzer. If you want to do event-related potentials, it's a bit more complicated, because in that case, we need to verify the timing and a lot of things. So that's a lot of effort. If a vendor would like to do it, they should do it with us. So that's basically what I can say about the equipment at this moment. My personal goal was in the very beginning, as I said, I started with neurofeedback, and it became very clear to me that stuff is going to play a role in the medical field. So it was very clear to us that we need proper approvals and take the high road. And when we then started with the event-related potentials and diagnostics, we figured this is even way more complex, right? And way more expensive. But we did that. We did all the qualifications and feel quite comfortable from the point of view of the technology. The rest is complicated enough, right? Because we figured that we need a large amount of subjects to build databases that allow us to create markers with high enough sensitivity and specificity, right? What would it help if the marker is not better than the flip of a coin? And we found markers like that, so we don't use them. That's also a finding. I wanted to know what works and what doesn't, and I can tell a lot of things simply do not work, which is fine. The German word, I'm living in the German part of Switzerland. The German word for science is directly translated, create wisdom, right? And if you figure out that something does not work, it's also wisdom. Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to read through all the questions here.
Yeah.
No, I'll help you with that, Bernard. Yeah.
And I'll just jump in. So I mean, I think the main question is what amplifiers work. And currently, as of now, BMedic and MITSAR work, and they're slightly different for that. So if you use a MITSAR, you're going to use two computers. I use a MITSAR, and I have two computers that run for it. And if you use BMedic's equipment, you just need one computer, and then you put the camera that sees the flashing light on the computer. You have that on whenever you're doing the assessment. So there'd be little differences between them. But the BMedic is obviously the easiest one because that's what it was designed to be used for. And so the question about the neurofield system, unfortunately, it doesn't. If you have a MITSAR using the neurofield system, of which a MITSAR also works for neurofield, then you could use that for this one as well.
The detection spike activity, and I guess, even more broadly, just any kind of general activity possibly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. It has the spike and wave detection that happens. And somebody also had asked about if it has the coherence. Yes, it does have coherence. It doesn't have phase reset and phase lag. That's a whole nother can of worms for things. But yeah, there is coherence on it. Well, actually, no, there's lag on it. So when you look into the coherence part, there is the lag. And Bernard, is there anything else listed on the coherence part of it? Is phase reset on?
I can actually, I do not exactly know what that is.
Let me look up on
I heard it. I heard about it. And there are so many special things that other groups have. And one of the problems is this is an immensely complex topic, right? And everybody is totally busy with researching their own approaches.
Yeah, I see on here, I'm looking on a report that I have, and we have the, let me stop share on this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share on this. Okay. So you guys should see that we do have the coherence right here. Here's an example where it automatically talks about what we're looking at, and we're seeing the Z-scores. We're seeing it in eyes open, eyes closed, and also in the VCBT condition as well. So, yeah. This is an example report that I can also go through if anybody has any questions specifically on it, but I wanted to pull up the coherence part since that was just asked about it. The asymmetry that we're looking at as well. Here are the tasks that we're looking at using AI when I was talking about the linear slope, and we're seeing how tight of it is to that line right here. And if something is, let's see, it's a flat regression curve, so 1, 2, or 3, or steep 7, 8, or 9, then we see that it falls outside of what we expect to look. So we can just dumbly kind of look here. We see 5 and 7. So we have a little bit of high variability, which can be linked to ADHD and PTSD, but the slope is pretty good. So that's the AI part that we were talking about, what that means, and then us as clinicians looking and kind of deciding on it. Here is the sense. Probably going backwards is probably more confusing. We're looking at the synchronization of things, looking at arousal in relationship to focusing. That's the...
Maybe I could quickly comment 2 things. So the report that you see here is just a sample report.
Yeah.
So how is that entire concept built? The first step is that you simply analyze your data, which is questionnaires, which is resting state EEG, which is, if you like, event-related potentials, right? And so you walk through that entire analysis process, and at some points you are asked questions. So you can look at signals, if you like. You don't have to, but you can look at signals. You can mark things that you think are relevant. And then all that information goes into the report. So what is the report? The report is based on a template. So you decide if your report shall have 1 page, 2 pages, 5 pages, 50 pages, right? So it's basically a Word document. HBImed provides you with all kinds of sample reports or templates, and then you can adapt them to your own needs. So you define what content do you want, in what order, then of course your logos and all of this, right? So you really customize the report to your needs. When you see here in this example a report with 51 pages, that doesn't mean that your report needs to have 51 pages. Or the report could also be structured as like a five-page summary, and then another 20-page detail, and then another maybe 10-page explanations. That's completely up to you, right? So when you see this sample report here, it doesn't mean that all the reports need to look like this. Yeah, I just quickly wanted to comment this. And then the other problem is, or not problem, the other thing is, how much detailed knowledge do you need to have? For me, it has always been super important to make technology such that it stays in the background and is most practical and most helpful, right? So one approach that you can take is to spend years and years and years to learn all the details, which some people do, which is great. But if you say, well, I just want to make sensible reports and want to be able to explain them to my customers or to the referring doctor and so on, then you can take the simpler road and say, okay, I learned the basics. I learned to record EEG ERPs. I learned to create reports, and I learned to explain this to other people. And so we are trying to offer more and more courses that allow for these different options, right? So for instance, the Brain Function Analyzer course that was just mentioned, that starts in April, is meant to give you a solid foundation, an easy entry door to get started with this exciting stuff without overwhelming you with all kinds of, you don't have to become an engineer. a physicist, a neurologist, a neuropsychologist at the same time, right? So you are the professional that you are, and you learn what you need to know to get most benefits from this.
That's looking at individually, for instance, a person's peak frequency, peak alpha frequency in particular. So maybe if you can show, the 1 hertz spins and how that relates with what you've got there in terms of the alpha peaks.
Yeah, so we can looking at, say, okay, so let me pull up. So say we're looking at eyes closed, and we want to look at what this person's alpha peak frequency is. Now, in the original going through, I have clicked what I want it to look at. And so I've clicked and I've seen that their peak alpha frequency is 9.28 hertz. We see here. So what's that? I also click the other areas of interest that we see here. And then we get to look at it in the single hertz bins in the head maps as well for seeing where that is. And we can look at it in both absolute and relative as well for here. What I love is that I get to look at that in all of these things for both eyes open, eyes closed, and most importantly, the VCPT task, because we can see that in the task, that this person actually has a pretty nice alpha. We see some slowing in the temporal regions, right? Especially on the left side. But then when we give them a task to do, what does it look like? And when we give them a task to do, we see that it actually slows down even more and in the front. So this person might, if we just gathered their eyes open, eyes closed data, we might say, okay, a little slowing, but then in their daily life, they're like, actually, I really struggle in my daily life. So now I got to see them during a task on what's going on here. So it's one more way. And then we're going to look at also the ERPs from this, but this is the raw EEG from it, which also then shows where they differ from the normative population. And then we can really see how much slowing is going on as well, and how little fast activity is going on. So lots of information here given from that. So let's see.
Thank you.
Oh, now, and then, so I hear about the different frequency bands are defined differently for different folks, such as the peak frequency of alpha. Yes, I don't understand exactly what we're talking about there. So alpha is usually defined as 8 to 12. Obviously, it can go all the way up to 18. So at that point, you're always going to want to go in if you have a client with faster alpha, and you're going to say, your alpha is faster. It's within the beta bands, but we can see, looking at the morphology of it, that it is alpha, sinusoidal. It, attenuates when eyes open and close. So we're going to know that it's alpha from that, and we're going to include that in the report. Is that what you're talking about in terms of different frequency bands? Or are you talking about how some people will define beta in a certain frequency versus another? Wikipedia or something else might define it slightly differently. If that's the case, it's going off of what this database is set up to, what they're defining it. And then you're going to use your clinician's eye to go in here and to say if that's slowed alpha into the theta band or if that's sped up alpha into the beta band. I'm assuming that's what you're talking about. So at that point, it's definitely a clinical eye.
Thank you. And I think the point you're making, or that you made there, is, thankfully for us, as clinicians, we're not on the verge of losing our job, even though AI is there. And I don't know if you want to talk at all about the AI component, report component that's in the works, or if it's premature for me to be asking you about that.
I talked a little bit about the one that with Andy, use of AI for, and somebody had asked about what is the difference of that actually in the text. So this report generator, as is using AI and using a report template, this is what the one I have is. So it's auto generating based off of the things that you as a clinician clicked and picked out. So you're looking at it, you're clicking, look at this, look at this, look at this. it's things that your eyes are already drawn to, and then it auto-populates what those things mean, and it puts it in there. Now, the next step is all of that information if we want to write a summary. And in the summary at this point, we're writing it as a clinician. We're given all this information. It's making it so it's easier for our clients to see in the pictures. And then our job, or if you want, I do a summary that summarizes all of these findings. And so the hope is that this next level of AI using Copilot, then we ask it to go through all of these areas that it has noticed of interest and to pull it together and then to put it in a summary and cite, NIH sources, or peer-reviewed studies on those findings. So that is where it's going towards it. That's a different thing, though. So you would start with this, and then that would be an add-on once it's ready. And that would just be for the summary aspect of it, for pulling it all together. Hopefully that clarifies it.
Yeah, maybe I could quickly comment. So I said earlier, HBI used AI before it was a hype, right? So what does it mean? We have a huge amount of data. And we wanted to see, okay, are there common things? Is there some evidence for hypotheses? So, for example, the clinicians, such as Andreas, have ideas. Oh, if we see this latency and that component and this and this and that in the EEG or ERP, then that's a marker for, say, methylphenidate or for a particular medication or for ADHD. And so you probably are familiar with the classes that Yuri Kropotov does. And he started this whole idea of biomarkers early on. But the only way to discover biomarkers and to validate them is to use AI tools, right? So it could be machine learning and deep learning and all of this. And we started very early on, 15 years ago, to apply such tools to discover biomarkers and validate them and see if they could be usable. So when you today use that, we engineer call it report generator. So this brain function analyzer, you profit from this. When you look at indexes like the arousal index or vigilance index or other indexes, these are built on such markers, right? So that means you do not have to understand all these details, because all these details go into such markers and are validated. And the other thing that Taylor mentioned, the so-called Copilot, was developed recently. And what that does, it takes the finished report, and you could even edit it, and then reads the report and adds stuff that it gets from thousands of reports that are the foundation for that engine, right? So think of a ChatGPT engine that powers the brain function analyzer. So the section that the Copilot adds, the AI section, is clearly marked as AI-generated content. It conforms, as far as I know, to all regulatory issues or things. But it's also marked in a way that people should take it as what it is, namely an AI-generated content, right? Here's a question: is it a software purchase or subscription-based service? Okay, so that brain function analyzer is simply a pay-as-you-go thing, right? So analysis of EEG and ERP. Basically, let me put it this way: you have three options basically when you want to analyze EEG and ERP. Option number one is the very classical and fully FDA approved and CE approved software, HBI database software. So you get a little software key that plugs into your computer, and then you can do all the analysis by yourself, like de-artifacting. When you're familiar with WinEEG, it's basically that. And here you pay per database comparison, right? If you need one database comparison or two for your report, that is what you pay. So we pay a basic license, and then you pay as you go. On the very other end, HBImed offers, and their partners offer a report service. So you could simply, I'm not sure if you offer this, Taylor, but you could simply go to like Angelica and Mitch or Taylor and say, hey, here's my recording. I would like to purchase a report that you can do. Or you can even get your recording done there. So I hope I don't over promise, but that's how we handle it here in Switzerland.
Yeah.
And then in between, there is what Taylor features here, and that upcoming course is all about, which is you use that brain function analyzer yourself. There is going forward no base cost. There is just an initial fee, and then after that, you pay for the report that you do. The Copilot is a little extra cost. So that's basically how it's done. And so there are no fixed costs that you have to cover. You can order one report or 100. It's like purchasing screws. Yeah.
And I want to make sure, Francis had asked a question a while ago about for protocol intervention information, and this is not, everybody has different equipment. So knowing if we're going to do amplitude training, or if you're somebody that can do Z-score training, or if you're going to do neuromodulation, it's not suggesting any of those things because equipment varies so much. I have never met a practitioner, like 2 clinicians that have all the same equipment and use the same thing. So it would be such a wide source. And then if you got it and you're like, that's not even what I have. So that part you're going to have to use in with the equipment that you have. You're going to have the information and then make decisions on with the equipment you have, what area. So like I said, if we kept seeing over and over that cingulate was going on, then we're going to be like, okay, well, let's target the cingulate, whether that is through stimulation, if that's through amplitude training or Z-score training, that's going to be up to you as a clinician using the tools that you have, but you're going to know what area to target based off of all the information you gathered from here. I hope that answers it.
Taylor, there's another thing that I'll mention. There is a report generator program that's available that allows for a pre-post comparison. You can put in 2 data sets, and that program will do a comparison. So if you're a person that does pre-post Qs and ERPs, this can be a relatively simple way to look at the differences.
Yeah, a lot of information, and glad that you guys could all be here and learn about that. But, my email's on there as well. So if anyone has questions for Bernard or I, or any of the Sayadars, feel free to reach out. So we're very excited on having people learn about this and utilize it in their practice.
Yes. Taylor and Bernard, thank you so much. Of course, if more questions come to you afterwards, just send them to NRBS or to Bernard or Taylor. We'll make sure they get to the right place. The recording will be available in about a week. So there we go. We do not have the date for the next webinar. It will be at the end of January or beginning of February. We're not sure yet, but you'll certainly get notified. And thank you so much for joining us today. Appreciate you.
Well, Angelica and Mitch, thank you so much for making this happen. Taylor, thank you so much for this. That was really great. Thank you.
Well done. Bye, everybody. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.